Well, first tonight, the Bishop of Leicester has told us that he's concerned about rising tensions around the asylum system. There have been angry protests outside several hotels across the East Midlands as channel crossings fuel a growing backlog. So tonight, we're taking a detailed look at how this region is being affected. We'll hear from a couple whose wedding was cancelled and a first-hand account of life inside the asylum system. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Jeremy Ball.
The asylum system's so politically explosive because of images like this. Small boats make it so much more visible and so much more dangerous too. And this morning, a police crackdown on suspected people smugglers here. This is footage from a raid in Nottingham. 2 Albanian nationals in their 40s have been arrested in Sherwood and Basford, suspected of using an inflatable boat to collect migrants from Belgium. And those crossings are now fueling a growing backlog of asylum claims here. Let's have a look at the numbers across the East Midlands government region. There are now almost 3,000 asylum seekers in dispersed accommodation, often house shares where private landlords can get incentives like renovation work. And well over 3,000 others are in 30 temporary hotels. So I've been to Long Eaton, where people have been living close to 2 of those hotels for several months. Just listen to the range of opinions here.
Oh, it frightens me, it bothers me. I think there's too many.
There's enough of ours over here that need help. Old people need help.
I've got more in common with an asylum seeker than I have with somebody who's dodging the £5 million tax bill. So I think we've got to be careful we're not missing where the real problem is.
Doctor's appointment, you can't get one because there's too many people waiting. Hospital appointments getting cancelled because they're overcrowded.
You've got to understand that these people are coming from war-torn countries and stuff, and if you was in their situation, you'd want the same thing happening to you.
Army sites and RAF sites, they're all got empty houses on, so I don't know why they don't turn some of them into the housing for the asylum seekers.
Personally, I don't see why they don't set up a job centre on the beaches, because there are so many qualified people coming in by boat. There are people who can fill all these skills gaps.
You wouldn't come across the channel, right, unless you were desperate.
We can't cope, can we? That's what I think.
So who are those asylum seekers? Well, they're people who've applied for the right to stay here as refugees. To succeed, they have to prove a well-founded fear of persecution, a system set up after the horrors of World War II. But there's anger now about how that's being exploited by economic migrants and criminal gangs. But look at this, 3/4 of last year's asylum decisions accepted that people could stay here. And the system has been the focus of this month's big production at Nottingham Playhouse.
Make yourself useful.
The Beekeeper of Aleppo, a heartbreaking story of a traumatic escape from the Syrian civil war.
And I'm scared.
A couple preyed on by violent people smugglers, then struggling to make a new start as asylum seekers here.
How long are you in this country?
If you want to understand what that's like, speak to Mo down the road here at Refugee Roots. Mo spent 2 years in the asylum system fighting for his right to settle here. 2 years when he wasn't allowed to work and faced the constant threat of being deported.
You have no control in your life at all. Pressure is enormous. So everybody started having a mental health problem too. I had a mental health problem. Church helped me to recover. I mean, you can't even go to the college. This is the last choice they got.
So what's the solution then?
Sooner they get that refugee status, they'll start to find a job, pay a tax. They're helping the country.
Steph and Tom here in Markfield were affected by that backlog too. After 2 years planning their wedding, their hotel venue decided to take an asylum contract instead.
I was at work, got a phone call, he just says, "Oh, I'm just ringing to let you know your wedding's cancelled." I was crying. I felt lost, gutted really. We'd done so much planning, we'd literally just sent the invites out the week before as well. I understand people need places to go, they need shelter, but it doesn't need to be 4 or 5-star wedding venues.
We want you out.
And hotels like this one in Mansfield have become a flashpoint over the last few weeks. There are legitimate local concerns, and tensions also being stoked up by groups from out of town.
In Leicester, there are those from our churches who visit people in these hotels.
But a very different message from Leicester's bishop. He wants more understanding.
I think we have a basic human duty
to welcome people who are at danger in their own country. I am worried about the rhetoric. We've become very polarised as a society. People feel it's acceptable to use very, very strong language, which I think is a real shame. And actually the numbers of people that we take here in the UK are far smaller than even our neighbours in France or Germany.
Those numbers mean there's now around one asylum seeker for every 780 residents here in the East Midlands. But 2/3 of them have been placed in our largest cities, often in cheaper neighbourhoods where services are already stretched. So now plans are being finalised to spread that accommodation across the region more equally.
The 3 city areas have taken a far greater share. They are very often concentrated in specific wards, in specific streets. What local authorities are saying is that they're too great numbers. You need to widen that more evenly across the area. You need to widen that more evenly across the region, because if you place too many people in limited numbers of streets, it does have a negative effect, and it's much more difficult to provide care and support they need.
Back at Refugee Roots, there's care and support for migrants, whatever their legal status, a place to socialise, to learn English too, to be treated as a human being.
Well, Jeremy's here with me in the studio. We saw in your report, some protests, and today we've got news of an arrest with regard to that. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, that was in Kegworth, where there is real concern about plans for over 200 new arrivals. And now, a lot of villagers turned out last night. People are really genuinely worried here, worried about who's coming, for instance, worried about the pressure on services like the local doctor's surgery, for instance. There are, though, also concerns about protecting the asylum seekers who'll be placed there, and the government contractor, Serco, says, look, these asylum hotels are now being targeted by far-right groups.
We also heard in your report about Steph. Now, she was talking about her wedding plans. Why are things like wedding receptions being cancelled like this?
They're essentially a casualty of lucrative block bookings. What happens is the hotels aren't commandeered. They either accept bookings. Sometimes they bid for these contracts as well, because, it's long-term business, and I'm told it's actually saved some hotels in this region from bankruptcy. Now, it has upset a lot of local councils because they say, look, we're just not getting enough notice to plan services around this, particularly in those smaller villages. And that's why council leaders in Leicestershire have written to the government asking them to stop that Kegworth plan.
And is anything being done to sort of calm this situation down a bit?
All sorts of stuff. First of all, a big push to clear the asylum backlog. That's so that the hotels won't be needed at all, of course. The government's also planning to actually stop people claiming the right to asylum if they arrive here on a small boat. Now, they argue that genuine refugees can come on resettlement schemes instead, like the ones we've heard so much about for Afghan interpreters and Ukrainians. What critics worry about is that a lot of refugees simply don't qualify for these resettlement schemes. And what the Bishop of Leicester says is that people fleeing violence actually need much easier routes to come here. What both sides do agree on, though, is the need to stop those people smuggling gangs.
Yeah. OK, Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for that.